I think that what's so interesting about this is sort of the narrative around a player and what expectations as a number one pick can do to a player, what the wrong role can do around the narrative of a player. Andrew Wiggins, to me, is in the perfect situation right now. As a number one option, playing on bad Minnesota teams, that wasn't the right role for him. I go back to 2019 summer when Kevin Durant clearly going to leave the Warriors. The Warriors being able to facilitate a sign and trade. They overpaid for D'Angelo Russell. They gave him the max, but they paid him $30 million a year so that they could cash that chip in at some point. And Wiggins was the guy that they ultimately ended up getting, and he has been a perfect fit for them. Spot up threes as a cutter, so valuable. How many times this year have we seen out of after timeout plays where he is the screener for Steph Curry? Knowing that two guys are going to run at Steph, he slips right to the rim for a layup. And, of course, his defense and his rebounding has been really good in the playoffs as well. I just think on this team, he doesn't have to be the guy. That's not who he is, but he's so valuable as that third or fourth guy, as a big wing. And I'm really happy for him that he's been able to change the narrative around his career.
Well, I'm happy for him as well, but let's be clear. He earned it. He earned changing that narrative just like he earned the initial narrative there was out about him. You see, a lot of times people walk around or people try to treat other individuals like they've been victimized by somebody else. No, you were victimized by yourself. You were a number one pick. You were in Minnesota. You were a bit demure. You were a bit passive. You weren't nearly as aggressive. You certainly didn't embrace the responsibility that comes along with being a number one overall pick in terms of being the face of a franchise, taking the bull by the horn and being aggressive about it. Okay, so that was what his situation was. He goes to Golden State. More specific role is required from him. He's got leaders around him. Everybody is not made of an ilk. That's not a crime. He did nothing wrong. I'm simply saying that there's an expectation that comes with being a number one overall pick. So some of the criticisms or the skepticism that was thrown out there about Andrew Wiggins, he had earned that. And now this year, he has shown that he has earned all the praise he is receiving because we get an opportunity to look at him in a different light because he is showing a level of productivity and assertiveness that we were looking for from him years ago.
So I'm going to disagree with that to a point just because the productivity is not there from from who he was in Minnesota. I mean,
you're looking at numbers. I'm looking at moments.
No, let me explain that for a second. So in Minnesota, he's a 20-plus per game scorer. He's a high-volume shot creator. He's inefficient. And I think that's where some of the narrative that we're talking about is created. You know, he wasn't a generational transcendent player.
Okay.
Doesn't mean he's not valuable.
Correct.
And is not a star in a different role,
Correct.
which has what he has been with the Warriors. So should he have been an all-star this year? Probably in a normal year where the Western Conference is healthier, he probably doesn't make an all-star team, let's be honest. I don't know that he's that level of player like a Kawhi Leonard or a Paul George, right? No, but listen, hold on.
Right.
But in this setting, he is a star in his role as a third or fourth guy. He is not a number one.
Well, we don't disagree there. But I think the way that he was playing in the first half of the season, regardless of who would have been available, I totally understand when you talk about a start as opposed to a reserve. But the way that he was playing in the first part of the season, before Clay arrived in January, the way that he was playing, I mean, Andrew Wiggins was playing lights out. He was having a spectacular earlier part of the season. We were all impressed by what we were seeing from him.
Yep.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.